Alright, everybody, we're going to talk about hypotenuse leg today. Now, hypotenuse is specifically a part of a right triangle. So for these to work, we must have a right triangle, which means we must have a 90-degree angle. Well, if I check out what I have here, I notice I have what looks like a 90-degree angle on both these triangles. Now, what a hypotenuse is the side that's opposite or across from our 90-degree angle. So if I was to draw a line out from the hypotenuse, from the right angle, the side that I would hit would be our hypotenuse. Also, the hypotenuse is always the longest side. So if you're not really good at drawing lines from vertex to side, that's okay, because you can look and you can see which one is the longest side is always going to be the hypotenuse. Okay, that's this side right here, and again that's this side right here. Now the rest of the sides, they're just considered to be legs. Okay, so we have a leg here and a leg here, as well as on this triangle. So when we're talking about hypotenuse leg congruency, what we're looking for specifically is to have this hypotenuse congruent to this hypotenuse, and any one of the legs as long as they're corresponding. So in this example, I would want AB and DE to be congruent. Now if we look, we notice we have hypotenuse leg. We also have a 90-degree angle present. Okay, so we're going to write a valid statement real quick with this. We would say triangle ABC would be congruent to triangle DEF. I'm making sure that I follow the same order of how I write these. I did the double side, and then went across to the no side, and the double side to no side. No side meaning that I don't have any congruency marked here. Okay, I'm just saying that so I can make sure I get the proper valid statement. So, what we're going to do for these proofs is hopefully we can figure out a 90-degree angle somewhere in there. Now, if we do find a 90-degree angle, we have to state that that angle is exactly 90 degrees. Then we have to state that 90-degree angles are congruent to other 90-degree angles. It sounds kind of silly to have to say that, but we need to state exactly what it's worth, and then state the fact that if they're worth the same thing, that's what makes them congruent. So you're going to see this little double statement, and I'm going to kind of highlight it when we come across it. So our first proof gives us some given information about perpendicular lines. It says that GH is perpendicular to HK, and JK is perpendicular to KH. It also tells us that GK is congruent to JH. That was all given. Well, I can mark some things here. I can mark that GK, this line, is congruent to JH, this line. What I can also mark, along with congruencies and parallels, is I can mark perpendiculars, because there's a very easy mark that we can make for that. It's just a 90-degree box. So I'm going to look for GH. This is GH, and we're saying that it's perpendicular to HK. That means that this angle is a 90-degree angle, and I'm going to mark it that way. It also tells me that JK is perpendicular to KH, so I should also have a 90-degree mark here. Alright, well, I have that marked, but I don't have anything stating about it yet. So let's state exactly what's happening here. We have the measure of angle GHK it's going to be the same as this angle, so we can say the same as measure of angle JKH, which is equal to 90 degrees. I had to write that on a separate line. I wish I had a little bit more space to fit it. But we want to state that these two angle measures are equal to the same amount, which is 90. That's the definition of perpendicular, right? Perpendicular angles are those that meet at 90-degree intersections. Okay? Then we have to state that seeing as they're both 90 degrees, that makes them congruent. So we want to state that angle GHK is congruent to angle JKH. And what we're going to say for that is the fact that all 90-degree angles are congruent. And we can say all right angles. All right angles congruent. Now I told you that I was going to highlight those steps. So here we go. These steps right here. If you ever come across perpendicular in your given information, more than likely you're going to have to mention something about the angle measures being 90 and then the fact that those angles are congruent because all right angles are congruent. These two steps in this order are very, very important to remember and keep in mind, especially if we're going to be using hypotenuse leg. We need to have these steps in this order pretty much all the time. I can't really think of any examples where we wouldn't need these to be stated. Okay. Anyways, let's continue on with this proof. What we're looking to do is prove a hypotenuse and a leg. Well, I already have the hypotenuse, right? Because here's my 90-degree angle, and that's the side across from it. Same deal here. So I got the hypotenuse. What I'm looking for now is a leg. Well, GH and JK are legs, but there's nothing saying that they're congruent, and HK is a leg on both of these triangles. Nice, because I have these two pieces already congruent to each other through reflexive property. I'm just going to state that. HK is congruent to HK through reflexive property. I'm abbreviating to ref prop just to save a little bit of space. Now I have a hypotenuse and a leg, so now I can state that we have triangle. Here we're talking about triangle GHK being congruent to triangle, let's see, we want to follow JKH. I went from G to H to K, so I need to go from J to KH. Alright. That was from hypotenuse leg. Now that I have these two triangles congruent, I can prove that the angles which make up the triangle are congruent. So angle G is congruent to angle J. That's based off of CP, CTC. Alright. Here's another problem for you to try. Try it out. Pause the video. Make sure that you copy the image so you can make the marks that you need. Okay, don't forget, if you come across perpendiculars, we want to make sure that we mention these two steps. Alright, let's check out how you did. We always start off with our given information as our first statement. So RS congruent to TV. RS perpendicular to ST. And TV perpendicular to VW. That's our given. Anything that we can mark? Yeah, it looks like we have congruency right here, RS and TV. We can also mark perpendiculars. So RS is perpendicular to ST, that's right here. And we have that TV is perpendicular to VW, so that's going to be right here. we also have T is midpoint of RW. Well, I can't mark anything with that quite yet. We're going to come back to that in a minute. Let's deal with these perpendiculars. Well, we're interested in this smaller triangle being congruent to this smaller triangle is what we're interested in. So I'm talking about angle, the measure of angle RST equaling the measure of angle TVW, which is going to be 90 degrees. That's the definition of perpendicular. My next statement, I have to mention that these angles now are congruent, RST, congruent to angle TVW. And that's because all right angles are congruent. Okay, again, these two steps in that order allow us to say that these angles are congruent to each other. Okay, so we have congruent angles, we have leg on both triangles. Now we need to figure out these hypotenuses. How are we going to get them congruent? Well, that's where this T is the midpoint of RW comes in, because this piece right here, RT, is going to be congruent to TW, and those pieces also happen to be our hypotenuse. Okay, so let's state that RT is congruent to TW. That's through the definition of midpoint. We can mark that. And now I have these smaller triangles congruent through hypotenuse leg. So I can say that triangle RST is congruent to triangle TVW through hypotenuse leg. What I'm trying to prove is the angles themselves, which are part of congruent triangles. So I have congruent triangles, I have those angles themselves congruent. So angle RTS is congruent to angle W. That's through CPCTC. Okay, so the takeaway from this particular session is really this key fact. Okay, you already know what perpendicular means, so you already know that you have to define it as being equal to 90. What you need to then do is state that these angles are congruent. Once you have that they're congruent, then we can start talking about either the legs or the hypotenuse to solve the rest of this triangle. Alright, I hope those helped you out. Bring any questions that you have to class, and we'll see if we can figure them out.